colossal security breach is even more disturbing in light of the additional information showing that China engaged in other election-related activities to undermine my first administration and our 2020 campaign, results of the U.S. midterm elections, and later the results of the 2020 presidential election itself. Separately, in mid-2019, the Chinese government's strategy against the United States was focused on undermining domestic confidence in the U.S. president. They wanted to just make you sound like your president wasn't so hot, when actually your president has done a great job.
These sound like reheated conspiracy theories that we've been hearing for years and years and years. The reality is Donald Trump is looking for any thin predicate to be able to claim election fraud so that he can exercise what he thinks are some grandiose presidential powers, so that he can do the thing that he's claiming to want to avoid, which is actually interfere in the next election. Because the only number really that's new here is his sinking approval ratings.
Mark, let me ask you, Mark, about the idea that this speech was very much about voter fraud and interference in elections, although there was not a claim that it had changed the outcome of elections, which I think is kind of the first time he's talked about this without saying that I won 2020. But obviously the inference is, well, this is happening and it makes you think that maybe it could. So is this about the Save America Act that the president has been hammering, trying to get Republicans to come together? They don't have the numbers in the Senate, but trying to get them to pass it. And this was one of the messages he was sending to the country and to the senators.
I don't think the president left any gray area or area for interpretation. This was about get, save, pass. That was the last thing he said. But let me just address some of what you said, Brian. It is a different era now than it was in 18 or in 20. This massively different. I sit on the advisory board of 2 quantum cybersecurity companies. I know something about this. AI and the threat of hacking using modern AI technology has made all of our systems, both public and private, more vulnerable than they have ever been. We know it's been proven, both by our own intelligence agencies as well as the private sector, that China has been data farming, harvesting data, both public and private, from the United States, from U.S. citizens, data they cannot even access yet until their cyber techniques enable them to do so. It is a different threat today than it was in 2020 and 2018, and that's part of why the president was so forward-looking. We didn't hear the moaning and complaining and kvetching, if you will, to use a very New York term, about what happened in the past. This was raising alarms about what could happen in the future. The threat is different. The threat is very real.
Yes, but he also had an enemy in this speech, and he does this in every speech. And instead of actually saying, listen, I'm going to put more resources at the FBI to ensure that we prevent those attacks, instead he tries to find an enemy in everything and wants to sort of sow doubt and fear in the election. And I would say I completely agree with you. I think the entire national security, the entire national security apparatus must take seriously this election, as they have in previous elections. Donald Trump has not given the FBI the funding in order to do that. And if anything, he has taken away that funding and put it towards immigration enforcement. FBI agents are doing immigration enforcement. They should not be doing that. They should be keeping our country safe. And so I agree with you, but the money and the resources are not part of that.
This country safe. If you talk to the families of murder victims of illegal aliens that poured over the border under the Biden administration, that is
I would say that the vast majority of people that they're deporting in this country are not violent criminals. They are people who have families, and he is stripping away TPS status and legal status from families. People are getting shot on the streets. So I would actually say I would be all for that if he were removing the very violent people. But he's not just doing that. He's removing families.
And I heard a different speech. I heard a speech that was looking in the rearview mirror, that was taking us back to 2017, that was taking us back to 2018, that was taking us back to 2019, 2020. I didn't hear any suggestions as to how he would fix the problems going forward or who he's going to task to take on these very serious cyber threats with AI and all the increasing pressure points that are going to be put on elections and businesses and whatnot as we try to live through the future. But I think it's important to understand this. There is a million miles between proving vulnerabilities and proving proofs of fraud. There's a million-mile gap between
They're
that.
two separate issues.
But he's
though.
trying to blur the two. I think that's the
They're
biggest
separate, but they're
pressing issue.
related. And look, is he still salty about what happened
Vulnerabilities
in the
and fraud
past?
are not related.
Yes, he is. But it's not just all talk, by the way. I challenge that. We've had 2 executive orders that have directed public-private partnerships to advance investments in quantum cybersecurity, hundreds of millions of dollars, investment dollars, by the way, that, like the country's investment in Intel, will return hundreds of millions of dollars back to the United States Treasury, not giveaways, not grants, as we've seen in the past. This administration is taking the threat seriously. Did he talk about it enough tonight? Could have done a little bit more,
Well, and the
but
context,
they are taking it
just very
seriously.
quickly, the context is also really important on your AI being used in this way. I mean, we're having a national conversation about data centers right now.
Yes,
there
we
are
are.
a lot of blue states and blue cities that are saying we want to put a moratorium on building them in their areas.
New York included.
They're going to be built somewhere, and they could be built in China.
That's right.
China wants to build them, and that is an increasingly, I would say, national security concern that all of us have to have.
I think we would have more credibility to what you said if Trump himself had any credibility on this issue. He has been crying fraud with zero credibility for years. There was over 60 cases. He lost all of them. He still contends to this day that he was the victim of some widespread
I just
fraud.
said that I
And
agree
so-
he's still salty, but talking about fraud and cyber vulnerabilities are separate but related issues.
I think salty's too soft of a word. I've been the target
Okay.
of those lies, of those conspiracy theories. We've had death threats at our house. We've had state troopers wrapped around our house.
Completely unacceptable.
We've had kids picked on at school. So those are not just softness. That's not just a personality trait. Those are lies. And he continues to lie, and he continues to try to create smoke around something that's not really there.
Well,
and that's the reality. And this is a serious problem in America. Donald Trump is lying to America every time he talks about the 2020 election. Republicans are sick and tired of it. You poll Republicans that are on the ballot right now, if they wanted Donald Trump to hold this speech tonight, I almost guess to a person they would have said no. They want him talking about gas prices. They want him talking about an end to the war in Iran. They want him to talk about inflation, grocery prices. They want him
I
talking
do
about
too.
issues that they care about, not something that didn't really happen and he's got too much pride to say, hey, I got it wrong.
Well, that's the thing, though. He can't talk about those things because he's failing on all of those issues, and so all he
Well,
has
that's not
left.
true. I mean,
it is true. He promised that he
didn't
would
read any of the numbers that came out.
He
this
promised
week.
that he
The
would lower.
PPI,
He
the
promised that he would
CPI,
lower costs.
consumer
Costs are up.
retail sales,
Inflation is still
the economy-
30% higher than when Joe Biden
Inflation's
left
the
office.
largest
Inflation-
decrease that we've seen since
What is
COVID.
inflation right now?
That's exactly correct.
It is too high. It's much lower than what it was because
Inflation
of policies
is higher.
that have been. No,
Inflation is higher than
was
when
higher.
public
That was
enemy
driven-
number one,
Well,
Joe Biden,
that's
left
not
office.
true.
Inflation
That
was
is not
driven
true.
lower because we
Inflation
had
was
an
at
MOU
3%
that was
when Biden left office. It's at 4%
For
right
30
now.
days.
Here's what I would say.
The core number's not,
Actually,
but that's
I think
okay.
Donald
That's not
Trump
true.
understands
word.
that the war, it has a direct correlation to this economy. And I think that whenever he started
does.
saying that he was going to wind down the war, all of those things were welcome news for the Americans. As you said, they don't want to be in this war. But instead, we are at a war again with Iran. And what is happening is costs are going up again. And so I do welcome the relief
That's not
for
what the
families.
CPI said or the
because
PPI said
just
this
a month
week.
ago he was getting out of this war, and now he's not. He's escalated it.
Well, Iran
Prices
has
are going
escalated.
up
They were
again.
responding to their escalation.